you want me.
Welcome. Thank you all for coming. This is very, very exciting. If you don't mind just taking a seat, we'll get started. We have town council members here. We've got members from the planning commission. We've got town staff. We've got environmental preservationists and historians. We've got developers and representatives from the development community. We've got students. We've got small business owners. We've got concerned citizens who go to every town council meeting. And we've got people who, for whom this is their first time at something like this. So this is pretty exciting. We've got people who've been here for a long time. We've got newcomers. So I just want to welcome everyone. My name is Jason King. It's a privilege to be here tonight. Myself and our team are going to present what we heard from you and how we translate that into urban planning. But first, I think it's a good idea for us to kick this off with our town manager.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Jim Manny. I'm the town manager. So I'd just like to take 2 minutes of your time, say a few words. Thank you all for coming. This is really, the one thing that everyone has been noticing about this is that how many people are showing up, not only tonight and last week at the opening, but also how many are showing up every day. 20 to 40 people per day have been coming and assisting Dover and Cole on coming up with these renditions. And that's really nice to see. And the people I've just talked to tonight, some of them have been around town a long time, and they're like, we've never seen such enthusiasm and participation by the residents of this town. It's refreshing, and I thank you all for coming and doing this. First, I'd like to thank the Dover and Cole team. Jason King is the Vice President, Project Manager, Planner. Pam Stacy King, his wife, is here in the back. They're a beautiful family. They brought them here today. We had pizza with them. And Natalie Lipsy, the architect, and Kessie Estel, the architect. And thank you again. So many positive comments about this team, and genuine comments. Some who are in this business, the planners, the planning board, and so forth, they've said this is the most actively engaged, money well-spent team that they've ever hired. And for that, that's a major compliment, because rarely do you hear comments like that. But congratulations to your team, and thank you for going over all this stuff. The Daedalus team, right? That's the New Orleans way of saying it, right? Yeah. Okay, well, welcome to Wakefield. It's the Daedalus team, that's what I'll call it. Right? So Sean, thank you again for being here and participating. Last week I thanked a couple of committees that were here, but there's more that I missed, quite honestly. So the town council has been actively engaged and been pushing this project forward. So thank you to the town council for participating in this and getting this close to the finish line. The planning board members, the planning department, economic development members, the Historic District Commission members, BPAC members, Conservation Committee members, and Affordable Housing members. We're all here tonight representing you in different ways and been coming all week to participate in this. Did I miss any committees that I didn't catch when I came in? Oh, that's good, because last week I missed them. And this, obviously the residents and citizens of this town, once again, it's been really nice having you here all week. The planning department, planning staff, they were here all week tied at the hip with Dover and Cole, and I think you're going to see some of the hard work that both units have been doing. So what are the next steps here? Dover and Cole will continue to work with the planning department and in an effort to refine development alternatives for this town, which will lead to the creation of model regulations for the town. There'll be continued opportunities to provide input through the webpage in the planning department. But in the end, the changes to the town's regulations will be subject to public hearings and community input. So once again, I'll turn it back over to you, and thank you again for everyone for coming.
All right, so let's get started. I'm curious, how many of you, this is your first time hearing about this stuff? First time in this room, first time on this project? Raise your hand. All right. Yeah, so just a few newcomers. The rest of you remember that the area that we're working on is the area Old Tower Hill Road and Kingston Road, the intersection. This area has a zoning category, highway commercial. It's had the same zoning category for about 75 years with almost no changes to it. So 25 years ago, I lived in South Kingston, South Kingstown, South Kingstown, right on URI campus at Fortin Road. And you know, the downtown has changed so much. The bike trail, the campus has changed a lot. This area actually hasn't changed that very much. It's been sort of frozen in time by these land development regulations. And our job is to unlock the potential, but not just economic development. We've been working on a neighborhood plan. It's a guiding document to evaluate the development projects, direct capital improvements, guide public policy, and make sure that South Kingstown continues to be the place people want it to be. And we're building on the work that you've done previously. The comprehensive plan in this town is a document you've all probably participated in. It's a powerful guiding document. Right there in the comp plan, it says, amend the regulations for the commercial highway district, address standards for scale, architectural elements, pedestrian access, connectivity, signage, landscaping, and street trees. So what we're doing here is the implementation of one very important part of your comprehensive plan. As you know, it's been a week of us working in this studio. We've been open from 9 to 6. Every day we've had the open design studio. But as Town Manager Manny said, we're only midway through the process. We went to architecture school, and we do pin-ups in architecture school. You bring your professors in, you show them, and it's called propose and dispose. You make edits, you make corrections. So the ink isn't dry, the pixels are not dry. Our purpose tonight is to take input, and when we come back to you again, it'll be revised. You know, it's an ongoing conversation. After this is phase 3, plan development. We're going to work on a preferred scenario. We'll draft the plan. There'll continue to be meetings, informal meetings, and then a formal adoption process. So, just like the town manager said, this isn't the end. But we're off to a great start. So yeah, so on Thursday, last week, that's right, we had over 60 people in the room. A lot of you were here. I see you in these pictures. And you remember working on the table maps. We have the table maps around the room. 11 tables, some of the most thoughtful discussion I've ever seen, I've ever been part of in many years of doing this. Just like someone said, you've been thinking about this area for a very long time. Our studio, yeah, it had between 30 and 40 people coming in, over 75 unique attendees. So there are repeat customers. A lot of you gave us quite a bit of your time, which was terrific. But there was a lot of new people, a lot of new faces. And we met informally, and our designers like Kessie have been putting up the work. They've already edited it a lot. If you were here in the first days, you saw things that have changed quite a bit. What we heard, you remember that you filled out the one-word card? There's a lot of funny ones. This is my favorite. One word that comes to mind about Old Tower Hill Road now and in the future. And the more times people wrote a word, the larger it appears in the word cloud. So ugly is like, who's 15, 16 people saying that, right? Commercial, it is While it might be an uninviting strip mall with a lot of big parking lots that is sort of ugly, it is also a commercial center for the community. We all go there, right? It's also a valued part of the tax base. So when we talk about the future, people talked about how it could continue to be local. It could continue to be commercial, but it could also be, people wrote mixed use and walkable. They were green and pedestrian, useful, vibrant. We did the interactive dot exercises, you remember. Those boards are over there. And Cassie did a tally of all this. There's going to be a report. You can see how many dots on each one. But in general, when we showed a CVS that looked like this, people were in favor of it, and a CVS that looked like that, people were not, right? If we showed even a McDonald's that looked like walkable, urban, multi-story mixed-use building right up to the street, we did a code in a place called Beaufort, South Carolina. That code generated that building instead of a building that was like that. When we showed bike lanes, people were in favor. When we showed all sort of local architecture, people were much more fond of that than off-the-shelf corporate chain style. So we took cues from the red and green dots that we placed. And a lot of you also took a lot of time to fill out these surveys, over 120 surveys. Very detailed. You can tell it's a college town. We've got professors and professional educators amongst us. There were some really good A-plus essays written in these and then what I tried to do is sort of turn those into 5 big ideas. It's hard to boil down the conversation that we had about everything. But if you had to, it goes something like this. New development should create great places. Plan a unique gateway experience into Wakefield and South Kingstown. Safe, comfortable, and interesting streets. Help solve housing and rental space affordability issues. Increase access to nature and build sustainably. And these are basically going to be like the 5 chapters of our presentation tonight. We heard new development should create great places. And paraphrasing, we heard safe, comfortable, and interesting streets. Now the town has already been working on this. And these streets look a lot better than they used to. When we were out there in 33 degrees, with 20-mile wind off the water, we weren't the only pedestrians out there. That's not a member of our team. There were people walking. There were people on bikes. You know, you've already taken a step in the direction of making that street safer and more multimodal. Sidewalks are improved. There's planting wells. There is bike lanes, which are quite often separated bike lanes. The travel lanes are right-sized. It slows down the traffic. Already a lot has been done. But while a big public investment has been made, private investment has not caught up yet. And there's buildings that don't quite address the street the way they could. And there's a large expanse of parking. There's a lot of areas that could use more open space. You can't blame a business. If a business isn't required to put in open space, the cheapest landscape, the easiest landscape to maintain is asphalt. And so that's one of the reasons there's so much asphalt out there. One of the things we talked about last time was how tall buildings should be, how intense. We talked about how the regulations, from the zoning to the lot coverage, 30% lot coverage. I know you've heard it from me before. Right now, every one of these sites is only allowed to build on 1/3 of the site. That's why you've got concrete boxes in the middle of parking. Only 1/3 of that site is allowed to be developed. There's big front setbacks, and if there's a big front setback, you might as well put cars in front. And the dominant visual image when you drive down Old Tower Hill Road is cars. And so we talked about how if you allow residential, right now it's not allowed in that area. If you allow residential, if you allow 60% of the site to be developed, and you require open space, how that changes the possibility. That 3 stories, things would start to look like this. We asked you about 4 stories, things would start to look kind of like this. At 5 stories, through the week we've been talking about how there are metrics in terms of income and traffic and open space, the performance measures. And what was interesting is that for a lot of people, the conversation kept coming back to the Sheldon building. And they said, that's one of our most favorite buildings. That's 4 stories. That doesn't feel awful. So that. And then, of course, that's connected to the Bell Block building, right? The postcards of downtown Wakefield show these buildings. Tourists stand here and have pictures of themselves taken in front of these buildings. And interestingly, if you look at it, this building has roughly 60% lot coverage. The lot goes back quite a bit. This building does a pretty good job of parking in the back. There is parking behind there, but you can't see it. It also does a good job of buffering the water before it reaches the river. So that kind of thing. So when you see the renderings, you're going to see buildings that are basically 3 to 4 stories. And it feels like that's what we're going to be codifying. So if we change the regulations, have a conversation with businesses, so this is the heart of town, the intersection of Kingstown Road and Old Tower Hill Road. This is the center. This is the spot where it's a four-corner intersection. Starbucks would be behind the viewer in this case. And unfortunately, it's a big, long expanse of asphalt. It's glowing backlit signs. It's trees that are actually surrounded by asphalt. It's buildings that have gotten a facelift, but it's still a kind of corporate architecture. So what if we change the regulations to allow the development community to do more? We would go from something like this to something like this. So here we're requiring open space. Here we're allowing them to build on more of the site. We could still have Wakefield Liquors. We could still have the bank. And when we did the parking calculations, you could still fit. There's still enough to park it. This is a mixed-use environment, which is to say, this is probably commercial, and this is probably a store. This looks to me like a cafe. There might be offices above. There's probably living above on a couple different floors. Natalie did a good job of looking at local architecture and sort of reproducing some of the best. She put in a gazebo. She has wayfinding signage. There's a stone wall, just like this is very New England, South Kingstown kind of thing, in order to keep people from going this way in the intersection. Yeah, whatever. Right now, that area gets pretty quiet at night. After people have left, commuters have left. So Natalie was imagining lights on, town center, just like near the ice cream place, near the duck restaurant. The lights are on over the river, right? We took inspiration from that. We walked that bridge last night, and she put up Edison bulb lights and made it a fun place for people to be. In plan, again, it goes from buildings in the middle of parking lots to green spaces, buildings fronting those green spaces, and ultimately parking in the center of the block. This is called perimeter buildings. This is how you make a main street. Now again, there is a step here where the bank and the liquor store and the other businesses stay, could work. This is the smallest increment of urbanism that will still transform the place. Then we started talking about architecture in the studio quite a bit. South Kingstown is a mix of styles. Terrific colonial, Richardsonian, big, amazing public buildings, right? This quirky, strange Victorian that you see every once in a while. There are Greek revival structures. There's the arts and crafts train stations, that one, the Amtrak one. There's some spooky Gothic revival every once in a while, and Nathaniel Hawthorne red. It looks awesome. So it's a mix of styles, but when people were articulating the styles for the area, they talked about it in terms of coastal architecture, this sort of beachy, shingle, white trim stuff, the gambrel roofs, the little towers, the kind of the very folk Victorian, sort of an L with a porch in the front, the modified salt boxes, simple, restrained, ultimately Quaker style became Victorian, and the sort of a modern rendition, sort of a Cape Cod influence. Right, so coastal architecture. Then there's also, in this area, there's the mill architecture. These buildings, these are the castles of America, with the turrets and the crenulations and the stonework. And a lot of this American mercantile structures, you can see that new structures have been taking sort of notes from, like this would have been, not too, it hasn't been there that long. And you can see some of the forms, the shapes, and the materials are coming from mill buildings. So that brings us to our first question. What is the style? What should the style be for this area? It's It's only, what, 20 minutes to the beach, you know, coastal architecture, but it's very close to the mill area, to the river. And so what we started with was an architecture that looked like this, inspired by those sturdy stone structures, with towers that look like the towers on the factory buildings, with sort of hip roofs and block structures. Anyway, we're just curious. When it comes time to codify what this area should look like, I'm going to ask, who's in favor of the coastal? You raise your hand. I'm going to ask, who's in favor of the mill building? You raise your hand. And if you don't like either of these, don't raise your hand. All right? So I'm curious. How many people feel like the architectural design guidelines should be coastal? Raise your hand.
But wait a minute, it depends on where it is,
Oh, yeah? Yeah?
I think. Because I'm going to vote for both of them.
What's that?
I'm gonna vote
Both
for
of both of them? That's
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah, yeah,
It depends.
yeah. Now, where, like, so, nothing in this area, this is kind of relatively small study area, but would you do mill architecture in one part of the study area and coastal in another?
Yeah.
Well, that makes their job harder. But that's interesting. That's interesting. All right, let's do coastal, mill, or both. So first, just coastal. All right, I got it. Just mill. So that's interesting. We have 25 saying coastal. We've got 8, I counted, saying mill. And how many people believe that we should do a mix? 35. All right, let's do that. Oh, that's neat. All right. So the job lot site. Now, hopefully, job lot stays there for a long time. It's a good anchor for the area. There's a lot of cheap stuff. I like job lot. Everybody likes Ocean State job lots. But there needs to be a plan for it in the long term. What could it possibly become? So Kessie was working on that same formula. What if you start with a green space, the New England Village green, start with that, and then there are buildings around it, parking disappears, and then you make a real commitment to trees. The way that would look in plan is, here's the job lot site. It's an enormous site. What the design team did is they broke it into blocks, small blocks, and with streets coming through it. That's a pedestrian street. They created a walkway, pathway. This is not a vehicular street. This is a walkway into the neighborhood area. They put residential because there are houses over there. You want to be a good neighbor. And then they transitioned from residential into a commercial area. So if you're a neighbor and you're walking down, I suppose if you're at Wakefield Pediatrics or you're walking down Holly Street and you look, right now the view is the back of the job lot. Right now the businesses there turn their back to Holly Street. Buildings can only have one front and one back, and it's the back. We designed, according to the design guidelines, it could possibly look something like that. This is a pedestrian street. We don't have very many of these. There's none in our district. But this is a cool and interesting way for people to. The other thing that we were talking to Sean about is that, let's go back and let's look at this. When you look at this, this area can only support so many coffee shops or souvenir shops or spas or fine dining or diners. We're going to need to find uses for these sites other than service, other than sales. And Sean and I have been talking about, the idea that we heard from the public was that there needs to be a partnership with the University of Rhode Island. We do a lot of work in Pittsburgh. And in Pittsburgh, the big campus there, Carnegie Mellon, they have their campus, and then they have, off the campus, a tech lab. And that tech lab is where professors are working with interns, and they're working with students. And then those students go on, and there are publicly financed and funded business incubators. There are grants from the from the federal government, from the state government. So those students learn in the tech lab. They start their business in an incubator, and then their small startup stays in these corridors. And the same thing happens in Boston all along the 6th corridor. Innovation corridors. So there's labs, there's office, there's lodging, there's retail, there's dining. It attracts a corporate partnership. It is great for retaining young people and at the same time giving them high-paying jobs. It's great for the tax base. It also diversifies the local economy. So the thinking was that the job lot, for all that it contributes for us, as great as it is to the community, could be a lot more. You know, this could be a satellite campus in a way to the University of Rhode Island. It could be a way where kids get their start. You know, and so they could be living in inexpensive spots. They could be learning in another. They could be start their business here, move their business there. All of that could be happening in a spot where they can get lunch or get breakfast or have dinner. And our firm designs these kind of things. And this job lot site in this college town would be a great place for it. I was going to ask, because originally it looked like this, and then we toned down the architecture. And then I was going to ask, which way should we go, coastal or mill? We've already decided that question, right? The mill building architecture is heavy with brick. It uses turrets. It uses clay colors instead of the grays. Our coastal architecture, our rule of thumb was if you can't find the color on a seagull, you can't use it. And this is something different, right? This is a sort of Italianate look. And so I guess what we'll be doing is working on design guidelines that allow for both. All right, another big idea. Increase access to nature and build sustainably. So it's a town very much committed to trails. I had never walked the trail behind South County Commons, gets you all the way over to Old Mountain Field. And it was cold, but there were people on that trail. This is a town in the Old Mountain Field that has a new master plan. The thing about the trails in this part of town is that there's the wonderful award-winning bike path that is so terrific. There are the new protected bike lanes, or separated bike lanes on Tower Hill Road. There's that great path to South County Commons, and there's some footpaths through the woods, unpaved, small little pathways. And the thing is, none of these are connected. They all are independent of each other. And so people have been coming in and saying, you know, how can we connect these? So our idea is that hand in hand with new development, there's also new investments in public facilities like these trails. I had a chance to walk the trails. We imagine that as Old Tower Hill Road develops, there are these paths that go in. And these should be ADA wide paths. These should be things that people can walk. The reservoir is there, so it's a spot you've got to stay out of the buffer and be careful around. It's a sensitive area. It's an aquifer lens. But you can have paths. And so what we're trying to do is connect that South County Commons path that goes to Old Mountain Field down into the study area. Right? These are sort of spurs, circles. People like to walk. They like to know their distance, and they like to not have to retread on the same spot. They were looking at ways we could connect the bike path, continue it. To, right now, it feels like it ends in a lot of ways over on Kingstown Road. What if instead of going along the street, it was actually connected along the right of way? The bike path continues. And then what Pam was working on was an on-street bike path loop. So people would be going down the bike path, and there's sort of like the spur, the Wakefield, I don't know how to describe it, Uptown Wakefield spur. And you'll be able to take that spur into this area that we've been describing, right? It just provides options. So that's another thing. What we'll be doing is working on, if we're going to give the developers, the development community, anything, and half of my clients are developers. Every place that we like, a developer built. We work with the development community. But at the same time, if you're going to give them something, then you have to ask for something also. We're asking for open space, and we're asking for truck bridges. So now, Cassie's going to take us through a couple more, and with a special emphasis on those trails and those connections.
So I work on the Paul Lattice site redesign. Currently, this is how the site looks now. One interesting thing that we really liked about this site was that the trail is right behind it. But right now, the current mall is basically turning its back away from the trail. So we wanted to really work on trail-oriented development. So this is how it could look if you change the code. So the corner building here could be a corner store. It could be a mixed-use building with commercial on the bottom and residential on top. These could be mixed-use buildings that front Kingstown Road on this side. Again, these are 3-story high, so commercial on the bottom and residential on top for apartments. And these are townhomes fronting the trail. And what we liked about this is that we didn't put the residentials facing Kingstown Road because that's more of a very vehicular road. So we thought it would be a good idea to have residential fronting the trail because it would be a more comfortable area for residential. And on that corner, fronting Cherry Lane is a multiplex building that can fit about 10 units. Now this is how this looks right now. When you're looking, when you're on Kingstown Road, looking at the entrance of the trail, and this is how it could look. This is that mixed-use building here, so you have commercial on the bottom and residential on top. And one interesting thing that I did about this site is that I calculated all the existing commercial areas that we have, and I made sure that we still retain the same, a similar amount of commercial on the bottom, but we're able to go up a little bit more and have residential, which would allow for a mix of residential uses like apartments and townhomes. Now this is how this bike path look right now. So this right here is the back of that corner building on Kingstown Road. I believe right now there's a nail salon in there. It's on the back of the trail. It's kind of forgetting about the trail, it's not really interacting with it. So this is what it could look like. So on this corner, you have an open space that could be used as a market space. You have the townhomes fronting the trail. You have a nice bike path lined with trees on the side. And it creates a nice buffer between the people on their bicycle that are on the bike path and people that are on the sidewalk. And it's just a nice environment to have residential on that corner. Now, throughout the week, I've had a few people come in and comment on this plaza area. And a lot of people wanted to see grass on here. So I listened to you guys, and I have 2 options here. One that shows grass and one that is all paved. But one good thing about the pavers is that these are permeable pavers. So they will still be able, the water will, which means that the water will not sit on that plaza. So you still get the same result as if you had grass. And paver is also less maintenance and easier to maintain than grass. As in grass, you always will have to mow it and always have to take care of it. As in paver, you just put it once and maybe do maintenance on it once a year. So that's one thing to keep in mind. And then this is a Cherry Lane. This is how this looks right now. A lot of people came in throughout the week and they were telling me that these buildings are basically vacant. So what if we change the code? What could it look like? It could look something like this. So this is the multiplex building that I showed on the plan. And it's a trail-oriented architecture. It's more comfortable, so you have housing in this area. And one cool thing about this building is that it can be an entirely residential building, or you can have the bottom floor be commercial as well. And I also work on the Midas site redesign. This is how it looks right now. So this is as you stand on Kingstown Road and you're looking at the site. And this is how it could look. So you have mixed-use buildings here. this could be again, commercial on the bottom and residential on the top floors. And so when we were looking at this site, we noticed that this building here was a really cool building architecturally, and I believe that's the building for the farm that's in that area here. So we made sure to maintain that building when we were envisioning what could happen with this site. We also played around with the architecture. So at first, this is what we had. And as people came in in the studio throughout the week, they decided that this look, they didn't really like this look. So I changed to have a different style of architecture. And so I changed it to something more vernacular New England that fits in the area a little bit more, as opposed to what it was before, which was something a bit more classical. Now, I'd like to hear from you guys. What do you think? Which one do you prefer? Do you prefer the vernacular New England architecture, or do you like the more classical architecture? So raise your hand if you prefer the vernacular New England architecture.
How about raise your hand if you prefer the classical?
Okay. That's a bit easier for us. Okay.
Question, how come other architecture styles aren't considered?
Well, how about the mill architecture?
How about modern architecture?
How about modern architecture?
So
It's just not considered,
it's what we heard from the community.
Yeah.
So as we were here throughout the week, a lot of people came in and said that the mill architecture is what's present in the area, and some said that the vernacular style is what's more prevalent. We went back and forth with those two, and it was the ones they heard most often. Nobody actually came in and asked for modern.
yes.
so I wasn't here during the meeting, so I apologize for that. But it'd be really cool to see like mill mixed with modern, like getting that brick style mixed with modern shop. Right? And you guys could have fun with it. It'd be really cool. Really drawing. It looks like every other town around here.
Well, how about that? Would you guys prefer to see something that's a mix of a modern mill style?
I'd like to say, I think that's a stretch to call that classical. I wouldn't have called that classical. I would have called that corporate boring. That's why I didn't vote for it.
You're right. You're right.
It doesn't give you quality of place.
I'm concerned that the vernacular is going to look like South County Commons,
Yeah.
and I'd like to see a vote of who wants more South County Commons around.
No.
Right. Well, that I feel was an attempt at the vernacular, and that is worst case scenario for me. So
Okay. All right. Very insightful.
I have one more thing too, trees. Those trees lose their leaves, right? So during the winter, it's so dry, they're really weeds, they run away with water. Like something like rhododendrons that keep their leaves year round. I don't know if you're familiar, but we have native plants that keep their leaves year round and keep the color. So I consider using those in the architecture diagrams.
Okay.
I don't even know if rhododendrons are in the,
Yeah,
the
no,
assets that you have access to.
They're year-round, and there are some that are native.
Okay, so more evergreen. Okay, okay. That's a good one. We also, this is, as you keep going down that same road, so this is what this looks right now, and this is what it could look like.
It's my dentist, he has to stay there.
That's your dentist? He could still be in there.
Well, every
He
kid's
could still be
wisdom
in this
teeth.
building, actually. It's just, it changes to create a better atmosphere. Now this is the job lot side. So this is what it looks now, and this is what it could look like. No, sorry, this is the MAGA side. This is what it could look like. So that building that I showed earlier, that's in that corner right here. I could not find a name for this road here, but that's Kingstown Road here, that corner right here. This is what it could look like. And one interesting thing about this design is that we made sure to connect the trail to the reservoir here on that side. And this building here is really cool architecturally, so we decided to keep it. And these buildings around it could be cottage court buildings, or they could also be small business space here in this area as well. And then now we will talk about the Wakefield site.
Yes. So one of the other study areas was the Wakefield Mall site redesign. This is the existing condition of what it looks like now. If you go to visit by walking, which is what we did when we first arrived, we had to walk straight through this parking lot. There weren't any sidewalks. There wasn't really any direction. Cars were driving just straight across. So an idea is to create a perpendicular main street. This will create a pathway for people to walk all the way through to the front of the mall. It has sidewalks on the side, parking in front of these new buildings, then maintaining a lot of the parking that still exists. This version also maintains the existing buildings. It maintains the mall, the People's, and the McDonald's, while creating a place that you really arrive to. As it develops in the future, it can create continuous blocks all the way across, a parking lot, a parking garage to make a loss in parking that we could have in the future, as well as the removal or relocation of these businesses into the same site. So if you were to move the People's out of here and remove that building, you create a plaza space where people can gather, have outdoor dining, while maintaining commercial on the ground floor. This is what it looks like now. This is what it could look like with just that first phase. So you would have a location that you really arrive to, on-street parking. The People's is maintained as it's there, but you create a place, a real place to meet. You'll have buildings. This one actually has a mix. So you have mills, mill style, you have coastal style, a little bit of everything in here. The People's remains, or it could be removed, and you would have a plaza space with outdoor dining. You have wayfinding as well, and a biking trail goes across. We were looking a little bit at the styles, the colors, as we went through the process of the entire week. We heard to have more variety, have different, more mill style, have more coastal style. So we have options for you all. And then this is what it looks like today. This is what it would look like with the first phase. And this is what it could look like with future development. We would have the parking garage on this area. You could have solar panels above the mall. You could have green spaces, outdoor dining, rooftop dining. This is a multimodal destination where you could have rent scooters, rent bikes. This is where the bus stop used to be. Bring the bus stop back in, have a trolley system. Question?
When you do these designs, is it taken into consideration about the service vehicles, the delivery 18-wheelers that have to go behind the Wakefield Mall or to all these other shops?
Yes.
So they can make, because the way the trees are around the mall, and I know this is just an idea, it can never be there. Trucks couldn't make it around that area.
Well, in the existing condition, the trucks go along here. As it continues, that same path is present. Most likely these trees won't go in, it's just to add color green, but the same width is maintained, and you'd be able to go all the way around. Yes.
Can I, as I look at your designs, and you've increased the building density a lot, which says you've removed a lot of parking, and aesthetically that's wonderful. And now you've mentioned parking garages a few times. So what is your thought? Does the developer be required to put in parking garages? Are they open garages? Does the municipality own them, or how does that work?
The entire lot is owned by one developer. If this lot were to be created, it could either be a ground leases, which is what's currently done for the McDonald's and for the People's, and the lot can be split up in ground leases, either maintained by the developer or split up in itself and sold off.
Bob, I'll talk about that more when.
All right,
This
very
is
good.
our
Thank you.
financial advisor. That's a requirement right here. I've heard a bit of it. This is the proposed design that we've created based off of everything we've heard throughout the week.
How do your talks normally go with developers that are commercial developers, and then you're trying to convince them to build residential on their property? Because I know a lot of commercial developers don't want to have anything to do with residential. That's why I think developers need how that works, how that matters to them.
Well, it varies.
What's funny is that,
Jason,
what's funny is that, there's a rendering that,
can you try and repeat
sure, yeah, sorry. The question is, when you show this sort of thing to a developer or to a property owner, how does that talk go? Especially when all they had was commercial leases. Now you're complicating their life by adding residential involved. So this week we had a conversation with 3 different major property owners. One was a restaurateur, and he liked the idea. When we started doing the math, he liked the idea of residential. He has a small spot. He imagined just 5 different residential units. He was worried about the bottom floor, but he'd have to reorganize his kitchen the way he had it planned. But he didn't feel like it was impossible. And there's another owner that we talked to. She owns a very large site. We've already shown a redevelopment of it. She didn't say anything the whole time. But her daughter was there. Her daughter was younger. And the daughter was very interested in doing something cool. The daughter had actually had something drawn up before. And it's a mix. It had residential. But it was illegal. They would have to go get a rezoning, they'd have to get, it's this whole process, and she just felt like it was huge. Well, I don't know. It took a lot of hope in what we did. This is a big one. But when Natalie put it up, it occurred to me that in Hammond, Louisiana, we did a rendering just like this, and it got built. And when we first had the conversation with the developer, we showed all that stuff in the parking lot. I said, well, where are we going to park? And in the case of Hammond, Louisiana, it was a public-private partnership to build that garage. So if you look at Hammond, Louisiana on a map, approaching from one of the highways, I forget which one, there's a big roundabout, and there's a mall site with a parking garage that looks very similar to this. So it does happen. But then there's a lot of developers and property owners for whom this is just no way they want to do this. They have been collecting a rent for 15 years, 25 years, and they're older now, and things are going fine. They don't want to change anything. So that's how it goes. It's a different conversation every time. But I do have hope this time. This design also will be shown to the owner of this site, and we'll get feedback, and we'll probably redraw.
There are developmental benefits to having a mix of uses, especially after COVID. You saw that office buildings became non-existent essentially. Nobody was in there. But residential is consistent throughout. Commercial spaces lost their tenants throughout COVID, but now there's a new cycle. As it goes on, you'll see that a mix of uses will maintain throughout any cycle in the economy if you have a little bit of everything. So those are the big benefits for mixed use.
I definitely see the benefits. I just think commercial people don't want to chase down 50 different people for that month.
So they often hire property managers for the residential portion, so it's not even their issue. They still get their check at the end of the month, and it's up to the manager to do all that. But you also have a lift in property values and land values, right?
Could you speak up a little?
Yeah, you get a lift in land value when you increase what's available to be done on a piece of land, right? So sometimes owners who have their little shop or their single-story commercial building, they don't want the headache of doing residential. They'll sell because they made their money to the next guy who is willing to undertake that project. So that often happens too. But we're not forcing anyone's hand. We're simply giving them that opportunity, which otherwise isn't good.
Another look is the environmental aspect of this. As you can see in this render, we're bringing in green roofs, solar panels. We have the permeable pavers that we were mentioning before. These are big environmental benefits, which is important in this area as it's a sole source aquifer. You really have to look at where the water is going on the sites. You want to make sure that once it gets to the reservoirs, to the rivers, to the estuaries and the ponds, it's been filtered at some point. And
Can you speak up just a little bit? We're having trouble hearing you in the back.
Okay. As you create these sites, you have to make sure that these new developments are filtering the water in some way, either filtering or maintaining that water, keeping it on site. These are the main waterways that are going into the aquifer in this area. And this is a green infrastructure. You started to see a little bit of these swales going onto Old Tower Hill Road. But the real thing that you need right there is plants that are going to suck up anything in the water and filter it through before it gets to the aquifers. Another green infrastructure that you're seeing in this presentation is the pervious pavement, which allows water to go through the ground in these little spaces between each of these stones. And there are levels to it. You could have these permeable pavers, or you could have crushed stone in the simplest way to create the same effect. You could have vegetative swales, which is putting plants into those different swales that we've seen. You could have retention ponds that hold the water before it moves on to the rivers. And it's what we've been hearing throughout the beginning of the presentation all the way to today, is that we need to plan for these new developments and plan for where the environmental impacts that they'll have on these areas. As well as creating a place, a destination. So this is the bowling alley. As we've heard throughout the week, is to not touch the bowling alley. But it's a perfect spot to create an entranceway, a gateway. We could have something similar to this, which is a welcome to Wakefield sign that you can see in any town, or you could create something special in this spot, something that reflects mill architecture, or a little bit of both, something new. But this is something we can vote on, whether you want a traditional sign or you would like to see a sculptural artistic sign. Is anybody in favor of one over the other, or some new style?
Sculpture could be cool, but not that.
A local artist. It's going to need more than just, oh yes.
There's a place, it's up in Boston. So they had a bowling alley, and then they built 4 stories of residential above the bowling alley, and a bunch of other stores around it, commercial space. Something Harbor up in Boston. It became super popular, and the going, like, the purchases of the units, like, went 40% higher than what the starting offering was. And the bowling alley is super popular. It's a very popular place. And it was a lot of young families that were working in Boston that then bought in there, had their families there, and then moved out after that, their families and sold their units. So I wouldn't say the bowling alley could remain, but it's still an opportunity to build on top for those of you who don't want to do the bowling alley. But it still could be a hub with residential on top. And there's a good example of Boston. It's something Harbor.
Look it up.
I'd have to look it up and present it later, but it's something to consider. I wouldn't say just don't touch it because you like what it is. It can still be what it is. Right? Change. So throwing that out there.
Yes. Yes? Question?
Me?
Yeah, you. Sorry.
So, I think, I'm getting 2 vibes out of this. One is there's a master plan with the notion of breaking, connecting these 4 corners. And developing smaller community groups, supporting smaller economic units, and at the same time, there's an equivalent emphasis on sort of gathering a stylistic approach. I think that's mistaken. I think whatever happens with the scale of the financial investment means that this really should be an inspiring piece of work. And I think you've got a long way to go before you ask people what type of sign they want in front of the bowling alley. As an architect, that's just what I have to say. I'll give you the 20 minutes.
Well, our goal in the end is to create 2 documents. We're going to create a design guideline, which is why we ask the design questions, as well as a comprehensive, It's a step-by-step plan of how to get to this point.
Neighborhood planning code.
Neighborhood planning code. So a step-by-step guide of like how this could actually be created and a rezoning of the area, how this would become legal. Because right now, these developers cannot build what we're showing on the sites. Yeah.
I don't know, maybe the town would know, the officials or whatever, but if you're bringing in a lot more residential, can the town have the water to support the water, sewer, but I mean actually like the drinking water or water use, can we handle that?
It's a great question. We were thinking about the sewer system as well. There's currently a sewer system in place, but as the development increases on this lot, there would have to be a new sewer system put in that can support all of this. But that's years down the line.
It could be, that could be a 20-year project. When they sized the pipes, when they first put it in, they planned for 20 years out. And what we're talking about redevelopment, that's going to take 10 or 20 years. So we need to get each of the most useful way of pipes.
Because I think the water now comes from like an aquifer. I don't think it comes from a reservoir. So, I mean, we have enough water.
Yeah, you should be deep in a charging.
I can speak to that a little bit. So the water from for Wakefield is from United Water, and they have wells up on Tuckertown Road area, and they do occasionally. You know, we go through summer periods where we're not able to have any outdoor watering. So there definitely are peak demand issues with our water supply system, but so obviously the town needs to be working with the public water supplier as this plan moves forward to make sure that there is adequate water supply.
I have a comment too. You're talking about the reservoir system in the aquifers. Those reservoirs are reservoirs for the mill system and the water power for the mill. They have nothing to do with drinking water. The water all goes down the Saugatuck River and out into Point Judith Pond. So that water system is very fragile. It's very important for Point Judith Pond and the coastal estuary that exists. But it does not have any influence, I don't think, over our groundwater, public water system, which is further to the west, the southwest from there.
That's correct.
And that's correct, right?
Yes. And just one other point to make on that, just connecting this part of town with the Point Judith Pond, whenever it rains in this area, because it's now 70% impervious cover or something approaching that, and there's really very little stormwater treatment, it all just goes untreated down the Indian Run and into the Saugatucket, and then out into Point Judith Pond, where we now have to close certain areas of Point Judith Pond to shellfishing because of the wet weather impact of stormwater. So I love the condensed development and allowing for mixed use and for the multi-story. I would love to see more green, and you know, I know at this level, and I was happy that you had the green infrastructure slides. At this level, we're not going to see detailed stormwater plans, but the idea of actually creating more, making sure that the water really is going into the ground. It's so important to the local economy, to our sense of place, that we can go and be in Point Judith Pond. You can have shellfish that are collected from the pond, you know, eat shellfish from the pond. That's an important part of our identity. And being able to sail or, you know, use, you know, these waters for recreational purposes, all that are impacted when it rains. And it's only going to get worse. So I just want to stress that piece of this. Yeah, and as Rich said, there's no drinking water aquifer in this part of town. That's a whole different area.
We go deeper into it in the report. We're going to create a report of everything we've heard, as well as everything that's been proposed. And it will be published for you guys all to see. It'll be a draft, so if there are any comments, you can always send them in, and we make edits before sending the official document out. Yes?
I think
one thing that has to be taken into consideration is that how we move from the present to one of these utopian situations. For example, a parking garage. Today, we don't have to deal with that because the density is such that we can drive in and do our shopping. It's one thing to live in New York or a very dense city, and thank God they did build a parking garage. But we're not at that situation. And so I think I have to make a transition from today to tomorrow. For example, like the back of the job lot building, this white building. What about a nice mural for today? And maybe the State Council on the Arts, etc., would work with the town, such that over a period of time, there's a new mural every 6 months or something. But it's such that it invites people to come and see the area and shop, etc. Also, Tower Hill Road, there's been this transition to kind of go green. The Department of Highways has made a small contribution, etc., etc. So I think the comments about greenness is very, very important.
One question I have 2 questions. One is, when we first moved here from Massachusetts, everybody said, you can't shop in Wakefield, you have to go north of the tower. And no one wants to go north of the towers. What plans do you have to bring in some department stores or something that people can shop at? Right now, we have a Job Lot and Marshalls.
Yes, hopefully with all these new ideas and new proposals, there would be the opportunity to bring in more businesses. First, you need somewhere to put all these businesses, and for that, it needs to be redeveloped. So that's the first step, is to allow the development.
We've got a lot of empty buildings now, so.
We've got one more piece, and then what'll happen is we can adjourn around the maps, around the plans, we can have, answer questions. I want to point, when we do adjourn, we have those conversations, I just want to point out that the Illustrious Master Plan is a really important document. And it's interesting, everything that we've been showing is basically red buildings. It's red buildings for new development, it's green for new greens. It feels like we're talking about a big, huge wholesale change, but the reality is, realistically, we've only been drawing perhaps half the corridor, because only half the corridor really has that development potential. We're not eliminating any roads. Red is new. These are actually relatively small structures throughout. Only occasionally would they be large enough for the larger change that we're talking about. One thing that the plan does do, it's hard to see from where you're at, so what Pam did is she created a zoom in. What the plan is doing is adding the new buildings, but also adding a lot of greens. Pam showed in this little part of the illustrative plan, there's the central green by Wakefield Liquors that we were talking about, so that's one kind of green, one kind of water retention, one kind of natural filtration system. Memorial Park is already there, so that's kind of nice. With new development comes small parks. Right now, all the green spaces are just like these leftover little remnants of the subdivision process. Just a little green over here, a little green over there. It's whatever the setback wouldn't let them build into. What Pam was trying to do is build coherent greens and linear parks. She's identifying in what will become the technical plan. There's the illustrative plan, and then there's the
Master plan.
Plan, technical plan, I don't know what you're talking about.
Another plan.
It's essentially, we call it a transect map. Just another word. If it wasn't for 10 days being in the school, it probably occurred to me. It's probably right in this outline. But the technical plan, let's call it that, identifies all these areas, because what it'll show is that build out will be a certain percentage of the buildings, a certain percentage of open space, and that open space number will go way up. So you're developing, but that's hand in hand with green space. We really like this tiny little pocket park in Pocket Plaza in Mobile, Alabama. Clearly, it's in a car zone. It is just surrounded by driveways and curb cuts. And this is one of those cases where small, deliberate green space was created. And so for pedestrians walking along the street, there's a spot to sit. There's a way to take in water. It's dedicated to someone. Our plan is, we love, this is the kind of things we love. We love big, huge redevelopment like Natalie was showing, billion-dollar reinvestments in parking garages. But to be honest, this is kind of this would be the first steps of a plan like ours. Very small first moves. Now, I know you've got questions about implementation and about financing. This is the last section of our presentation, and then we can do questions and answers. And also, actually, Sean will present. He's got 8 or 9 slides. Then what we'll do is Kessie's going to ask, is the plan on the right track? And you have a chance to vote on some of the specific ideas that you've seen and about the plan in general. Well, let's just talk for a few minutes about implementation. Then we'll ask some questions of the group, and then we'll break down into Q&A.
All right, since everyone was having a hard time hearing me earlier, I'm going to come closer to you. It also helps because I'm short. All right, so let's start with something. Yesterday when the weather was a little bit nice, okay. Yesterday when the weather was a bit nice, oh, sorry for Mike's here. I went for a walk over by the cemetery. It was amazing. I saw graves from the 1700s and the 1800s and the 1900s, and a lot of them had names that I recognized on the sign-in sheets. I saw the Stedmans. I walked by their place. I saw a big Civil War monument where someone had taken the time to put a new flag and a new wreath, right? This is a community that cares about its past, and a community that cares about its past typically cares about its future, right? Which is why we're all here. Which is why it made me wonder when I came back here, where are we now? We're in school, right? Where are the kids? Raise your hand if you have a child under 15 at home. Is that a majority or a minority of the people sitting here? Minority. A very small minority. And as we walked along these hallways, these corridors, with all the kids' hand-drawn notes and their painted things with their class of 2012, 2016, and we see that. We see all of their painted stuff, and it's just sitting there now. It's just litter, right? It reminded me of the cemetery that I just walked by, right? Because we're in a place that had children and isn't. So when you were telling us about your economic development challenges, the first question that I have, what does economics start with? Does it start with money or with people? People. Who creates economic events? People. Do people get older or younger? If we don't have younger people coming up behind us, what path are we on? Just conceptually, forget everything else. What path are we on?
Demise.
All right, so we all are in agreement. So when we look at what census says, the red stuff over here, that's loss, okay, population loss. Now this is South Kingstown generally, not just Wakefield. But you see a pattern. Are 5-year-olds moving themselves out of town? Parents are bringing them out. Why? Or their jobs aren't here, or something, right? School's too expensive. There's a number of factors that aren't working for them, so they're leaving. So if we change nothing in the zone, right? Everyone says, well, it's kind of ugly, but generally, let's just kind of leave it alone. We like it because it worked for us in the past. We're unlikely to change materially what you see over there. If we want to change that, we're going to have to do something different, right? Is that generally agreed upon? Okay, so that's what you guys told me too. I looked at the data, it absolutely agrees with what you're showing. Now, there's some, part of our give and take here is what should develop here. This, if everyone closed their eyes, opened them again, and I said, where is that? If you didn't know it was here, could you even say what state it's in? Nope. It's impossible, right? That could be in Louisiana near my house. That could be here. It's just not possible.
So while we can sort of pitch the ball back and forth about what the style should be, how dense it should be, arguably it's got to do something different, right? That's something different, as Jason pointed out. It's not enough of the town. We're not arguing to change everything, but in a place that's already seeing more density, more high car usage, all of these things where people are going there, we have an opportunity to do something bigger than we could do, for example, on Main Street, right? Those buildings are sitting there, we're not touching them. This is really your only opportunity along a reasonable stretch where you can make some of these bigger changes. I went and looked at housing. Average price for asking price, $685. All right? That means assuming you put 20% down, you better make at least $180,000 at a household level to buy that house. Out of a lot or a few people? You're a recent graduate. Are you paying for that? No. You look for a rental property. There's a few things, but there are a lot. No, it's almost nothing, right? I did see one rental, $10,000 a month. $10,000 a month. Can you believe that? $10,000 a month. That's New York City style prices, right? And we're talking about here in South County. $10,000 a month. That's a problem. Jason talked about lack of linkages to the university. It's absolutely true. One of the best drivers for getting new investment into an area is getting the people who are already there, already paying to come here from other places, to figure out how to expand that into your area. Right now, if you look at the data that comes from a group called Placer AI, it shows you who's coming from where. It tracks your cell phone. Don't let anyone tell you it doesn't. Cell phone tracks everywhere. It shows the students coming down. They don't even stop for coffee on the way to school. It's literally, this is the road that they pass by on the way to somewhere else. It's that unimportant. It's just asphalt to get through. They may stop when they come back for a coffee or to go to the gym, right? But it's not even getting their attention. But that's opportunity. Just like all that traffic that backs up when it goes to the bridge. Those people need a reason to stop, get out of their car, stay here, spend money, eat, do something, right? So this is our opportunity to find out how to take some of those negatives and turn them to our advantage. We also talked about the outdated regulations. Look, let's just be frank. If you're a building owner or a landowner, you built what was legal, right? No fault in that. But if I gave you the opportunity to build something else that you can make a lot more money on, most people would say what? At least let me think about it, right? So, this is just to summarize what you guys told me. We got to do something about our population, right? At least maintain it. Preferably, we'll get some growth back, at least among families. We need housing, more kinds of housing. We need housing supply added to the market. We don't know, based upon what we're showing you here. These drawings, they do not specify what percent is housing, what percent is commercial. At this point, these are indicative, right? This is showing what's possible. Each landowner and building owner is going to do their own pro forma. They're going to go through their own exercise to see what makes sense for their building in the right time, right? And this will take time, 10 years, 20 years. But it helps to solve that. We also need to look at when we're thinking about future opportunities. You asked for retail, right? Right. So things like retail, things like advanced tie-ins with the university. These touch different skills levels, right? Different levels of skill for different people. Students, retirees, they have different mindsets for what kind of jobs they would want to have. We're not only looking at high-end white-collar jobs, right? We need to be cognizant of that. And also, we want to make sure that if we did the code reform as we're talking about, suddenly you open up a world of possibility that's currently not legal. Typically, is that good for the economy or bad for the economy? Right. So these are all positive things that turn around some of the negatives that you guys told me about. So, first step in this, we do what we're doing now. Come up with a plan, talk it through, maybe we argue, but in the end, you come up with something that everyone's generally supportive of, right? That plan, once it's in place, then gives us the ability to make legal changes, right? Those legal changes then stimulate things like we can rebrand the area. Internally, we've been calling it Uptown. We've got a downtown, right? But what's uptown? We don't know, so we can brand it. We can make it whatever you want it to be, right? But just like you have Fifth Avenue or, I don't know, in Boston, Newbury Street, right? So it's a place. You know immediately if I say that, oh, it's Shishi, Italian, whatever it is, it automatically comes to mind. We can have that effect, right? Next, the businesses themselves, when they see positive changes, just like you have a merchants association downtown, you can have one uptown. And often a merchants association, and we'll talk about this more in a second, gives way to a bid for the business that are choosing to pay to get more services. Again, I got a slide on that. That sort of opens up the floodgates for having these new initiatives take root. Okay? Now, the Merchants Association is typically just a voluntary group. Anyone who's on the strip, they can decide, hey, we want to participate. We're going to pay into a bucket. We get more marketing out of it. Maybe someone does sort of part-time work to talk to government on everyone's behalf. The bid is more of a legal group, and they then decide that the members of the group have sort of taxing authority over the businesses in that area. But what they can do then is remove from any one business owner the requirement, for example, to maintain just their trees or landscape. It becomes shared, right? As everyone puts into the pool, the bid now can go down and clean those water wells that get full of trash, right? They can go take care of the landscaping. They can put up those common signs. All the things that would be really hard for one business to do. They can pay for the branding, the new signage, right? But it's still not everything, but it's a step in the right direction. But imagine branding like this. So I asked my handy AI, I cannot draw. I work with these guys. They're all the beautiful artists. You ask me to draw a circle, you'll hang your head in shame looking at me saying, I can't believe you hang around with that. So I asked Midjourney, let's come up with some logos. I'm not going to ask you to vote on these, there's 6. But just looking at it, one of those 6 could potentially be interesting, right? We have different versions of it, different names, but you can see that becoming a place, right? It calls out different parts of the community, the landscape, the architecture is a little different in each one, right? And it doesn't have to be an easy way. But doesn't that add to differentiation? You begin to see that you've got a new place. What about McDonald's reimagined? This is again AI, can't spell. Don't look at the McDonald's spelling. It's wrong everywhere, something wrong. But the McDonald's itself looks excellent, right? Much better than the corporate box. Now, I heard you say, hey, we're going to look like everywhere else, but we already look like everywhere else. You look like everywhere else the bad way, though. Not like New England, like everywhere else, right? So the question is, as we develop forward, if we had some standards that could even be adopted for the Main Street, when we were walking in Newport on Saturday, we stopped because Starbucks was in a beautiful historic building right on the waterfront, right? It didn't distract from the flow. They fit into their nice little box. Inside was a standard Starbucks you've come to know and love, but outside it fit, right? We could have that here. There's no reason when you come off of one that you come down and you say, well, I've just entered the twilight zone. I'm now everywhere and nowhere. Right? Generic. Exactly. So, example. Gray box. That is your land area. 10,000 square feet allowable under current code. The numbers are made up. I just literally said we have a gray box, which is your land area. It gives you 30% lot coverage. Wet finger in the air. I got 10,000 square feet of commercial space. Under the new zoning, I can go up 3 stories and I can cover 60% of the land area. Bada bing, bada boom, I got 60,000 square feet. That's divided between retail and commercial. Okay, let's do some math. Commercial highway is one column, that's our current zoning, it may be highway commercial, and I do numbers, not planning. The form-based code is what we're recommending, then there's a difference. Okay, so we're just gonna walk through some real estate math. I didn't put the whole financial model. I wouldn't do that to you at this time at night, but there will be a test. So, as noted, we got 10,000 in our current zoning. We're going to go up to 60, big jump, right? 50,000. Rents. Typically, you can command higher rents in new buildings. they're purpose-built, they're newer, infrastructure is better, stuff doesn't break as much, they're better insulated, running costs are lower, insurance is lower, all that sort of stuff. So we get a bump in rent. Residential units, we have none. By law now, we added 50, right? We just added 50 units to the supply. Residential rents, I underwrote at $3 per foot, which helps me to make all the math work. If I go much less than that, it doesn't. 700 square foot unit comes in at $2,100. If I bump that to, let's say, 1,000, and we make them two beds, obviously you can split that among roommates and the cost goes down. But I did all the 51 one beds. Leverage development costs, which is after we account for the cost of borrowing money. You got $21 million you got to spend. Now, you're in the development world, most of you do not have $21 million, but if you're in the development world, you'll understand how this works. You borrow about 65% of that, so 35% is equity. The owner of the building, what they call the sponsor, normally puts 10% of the equity in. About 3.5% total equity, total project cost comes from the sponsor. So in this scenario, that would be about $780,000. Okay? Now, what does that get us? It gets us what's called net operating income, NOI. That's what the real estate world lives and dies by. Under your current building, you make $90 grand per year. You have no debt. You just run it as it always runs, you get $90 grand. Under the new version, I get $1.5 million. Is that better or worse for most people? That's better. That's right. So, now, if I value that, real estate works on something called a cap rate. It's the relationship between your NOI and value. The older and junkier your building is, the higher your cap rate is, the lower the value is. So here we have a cap rate of 9%, gives me about $1 million value on your cash flowing but old business. I can get a 5 cap on a brand new building. That's worth what? $29.6 million. Which one is better? That translates also into higher land costs. This is the stimulation, the motivation behind when people see that they can do more, that they say, maybe I will take a look at doing that. We can't promise that people are going to come right out of the box and redevelop, right? It's everyone's individual right and choice as a landowner to do things as they see fit. But this is pretty powerful motivation. And this is also exaggerated, right? The scale here is much bigger than normal, but it makes the point. Okay, so the yield on cost is just, if there are any developers in the room, they look at yield on cost and the margin between the cap rate and yield on cost to see if an idea makes sense. This one makes sense. Okay, so now we talked about parking. How do we fund parking, right? We talked about public-private partnerships. Does the private guy pay for it? Does the public guy pay for it? One, there's no answer. Could be, it depends which developer comes to town, but let's assume that we could potentially put in place a TIF. Okay? I'm assuming most people don't know what a TIF is, but raise your hand if you do. Just curious. No, more than I thought. All right, so we got 5 or 6 people. So a TIF is just tax increment finance. So the way this works, imagine you've got a building, right, within our study area. One building in the present moment has no increment, right? The tax, whatever you pay for property taxes, has an increment of 0. You pay $2,500, the government takes nothing out of that. Now, if we had put a TIF in place, the very next year when you pay your property taxes, assume it goes up to $2,650. That change from the base year gets captured, okay? As we move out to the end of a TIF period, normally you designate a TIF for 10 years, 20 years, in some cases even 30 years. The value of your assessment goes up. As the assessment goes up, you collect that and put it into a fund. When that fund is applied, when every building in an area is pushing their money into that fund, the fund can get pretty big pretty fast. Normally, in the first few years, the fund doesn't grow as much because you're still developing, but by the later years, it picks up a lot of money. So, and here, sorry guys, I got to come back to points of this. So, this is time on the bottom, right? You come to a certain point where you have a date, not a dale. Maybe I can't spell as well as not draw, but a date. Everything under the shaded line, that's the notional increase in taxes that gets captured, right? And the government can then use that money for specified purposes, like the parking garage, right? The parking deck that otherwise may never get built. So we took some scenarios that they had put in, And it ranged from 390 million worth of investment all the way up to about $1 billion. We had already assumed when we did the 3, 4, and 5-story exercise, that's how that ties in. We know we're not going to the high point, we may not even go to the middle point. I use the low point. Under the low point, at the end of our TIF period, we're generating about $4.5 million in extra increment. Okay? Over the 10-year TIF period, that's $16 million. If I took that $16 million, when do I get it? Do I get it over time, or do I get it right up front? Over time, right? That's a problem. When do I need to spend it? Right now. Okay, so we take that $16 million, what do? We figure out how we can pull it back and structure a loan to give us enough money to build the stuff we need to build and let the TIF repay the debt. Okay, so I built a loan that does that. Gives us $12.5 million up front. Could be our own money, 100% in that debt. We control it, we do whatever we need to, or it's co-investment with a developer, right? Depending upon how things go, how fast. But that's a way that you can make the math work. That green shaded area, that's the principal being paid off, right? So you see it has to, in the early years, it really doesn't even pay its interest. It's negatively amortizing, but once the TIF payments, or the TIF increment grows big enough, catches up with the interest payment, slams down all the principal, and you've got your infrastructure improvements. Everyone paid their taxes as normal. There was no change in property tax. At the end of the TIF period, the TIF property taxes go back to state, city, county, whoever was actually getting it, so they get their money back. They're held at the original amount that they got at the beginning of the TIF period. It's a generally useful way to generate money. Okay, so now we're going to pull it. Good? Everybody okay? All right. Sorry, that was a lot of numbers.
Okay, I feel like I was back at my statistics class in college. I can't even say the word. Okay, back to fun things. Now I'm going to ask you guys a question, and you will raise your hand so that we can know. Is this your first time participating in this project? Have you stuck around throughout the week? Okay, one person. Okay, there's some new, okay, good. There are some new people here. Do you like the idea of different type of green spaces? Raise your hand if yes. Nice. Okay, now let's take pictures, okay. Raise your hand if maybe. Okay. One person for maybe. Raise your hand if you don't like the idea of having green spaces. Okay. All right, next question. Do you like this idea of redevelopment of Kingstown Road and Old Tower Hill Road? Yes, raise your hand. Okay. More than half. That's good. Maybe. Raise your hand. Okay. No. Who doesn't like this idea? Okay. Next question. Do you like the idea of introducing pedestrian streets to the Old Tower Hill Road area? Yes, raise your hand. Okay. Okay. Maybe, raise your hand. 4. No, raise your hand. All right. Do you like the idea of entry signage? Doesn't have to be this one, but some type of signage. Okay. Yes. Okay. Maybe. Raise your hand. Okay. No. Who does not like this idea? Okay, we're not having a loud no tonight. I like that. Do you like the idea of a more connected trail network? Yes, raise your hand. All right. How about no? How about no? Who does not like the idea of a more connected trail network? Okay. Maybe? All right. Okay, so we have, yes, we barely have that. Do you like the idea of trail-oriented development? Raise your hand for no first. Okay, no no's. Maybe. One. 6 maybes. Okay. Yes. Okay. All right. And now, based on what you've heard tonight, do you feel like the plan is on the right track? Raise your hand for no first. Okay, maybe? And yes. All right. Nice. And to end the night, I will give the mic to Jamie. Come on, silly.
Oh, there's
For most of you, you may or may not know me. My name is Jamie Rabbit. I'm the planning director, and I am absolutely excited. So excited that everyone participated during the week. As a planning director, when we undertake studies like this, and we have conversations with the town council, our planning board, our consultant, and we push the information out, and we sit back and we wonder, are we going to get 4 people, or 400, or 40, and you just don't know. And on the first night, last Thursday, when over 70 people walked in the door, we knew potentially we had some excitement, we had some momentum, we had some interest in what we're potentially trying to do. And to Sean's point tonight, as well as the members of Dover and Cole's team, this is just potentially allowing an opportunity to the community to do something different than what zoning allows today. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done between tonight's meeting and a final product. And there will be a multitude of opportunities to work with our planning department and with Dover and Cole and continue to provide input. There are brochures for tonight's meeting that are on the table outside. There's a QR code on that if you scan that, there's a web page on that. It instantly takes you to the town's website that's been created specifically for this project. So if you want to keep up to date on everything, I encourage you to continue to check back to that web page. There may be questionnaires there. There may be additional polls there for you to have opportunity to have additional input based on revisions made to renderings and plans and ideas throughout the process. There's also an exit survey that's on the table here. You can fill that out tonight and leave it on the table. You can fill that out and drop it back at the town hall in the planning department, and we'll make sure Dover and Cole gets those, and they also have an opportunity to evaluate those and incorporate some of the items and concerns people have associated with this project. There are a couple good questions tonight. There are a lot of unanswered questions that we still have to evaluate. Sewer capacity, water capacity, stormwater management. I can tell you right now, in that corridor that we're looking at, there's little to no stormwater management. When it rains, it's sheet flow, it goes into the catch basins, and it goes to our streams and rivers. So even if you have increased density on the site, or similar density on the site that you have now, anything that's done new will have 100% stormwater management concurrent with whatever regulatory requirements are required by the town, the state, and the federal government based on the scale of the project. So now you have little to nothing. Any change in any development patterns, you will have the latest regulatory required stormwater management in place, which should over time enhance water quality of our streams, wetlands, and water bodies. So there's some positive aspects to the redevelopment of this corridor. But I don't want you, if there's something you saw tonight, I want you to keep an open mind. Don't be overly concerned or potentially negative. Provide input. We'll try and take that input, turn something that could be conceived as a negative, and try and turn it into a positive with regard requirements as we move forward. I think it was an interesting conversation tonight between coastal existing architecture within the community, mill architecture, whether we do traditional. And I've always been taught in time that it's hard to replicate a place, but there is such a discussion on a modern interpretation of a historic vernacular. So I think there was some discussion tonight that we like the colonialism, we like the mill, but maybe there's a modern interpretation of that we could really honor our past, but move into the future. And that's a challenge for the urban planners and the architect. And, you know, Dover and Cole, and sometimes I'm called an urban planner, but that's a name. That's something we're trained to do and we're taught to do. Just because we have urban, no one here tonight is trying to make South Kingstown look like an urbanized place. We understand the dynamics of South Kingstown every day. Even though I understand, I learn more daily. Dover and Cole, as well as Sean from the Debelius, has learned more in the week through their conversations with people, and we want to continue those conversations. But again, I am thrilled to death as the planning director for the town, and conversations we've had with everybody of your participation and the fact that you're in this process with an open mind. That we really haven't heard in the past week a lot of negative comments. We've heard concerns, but we've heard a lot of positive, intuitive comments to move this quarter potentially into a new realm and new vision. But it's going to take time. You know, Sean went through the economics. Some landowners may buy into that. It may take another generation of landowners to buy into that. So we're patient. You know, it took 200 to 300 years for that corridor to look like it does today. It's not going to happen overnight. It's not going.
I don't think it's 300 years.
But please, in 2 years, don't come back to me and say, Jamie, in 2024, I sat at the Wakefield Elementary School, and why hasn't anything happened? We did all this work. It takes time. Please, everybody, it does take time. If we had a magic wand, it was Baker Field, and we had some billionaire who wanted to invest, it may be an easier task. But you have landlords who have rented buildings. You know, it's a blessing and a curse at the same time. When you have fully rented properties, fully rented buildings, it's hard to redevelop those. If you had a corridor that was 50% vacancy, it may be easier to develop that. But it's going to take time, so bear with us. We're looking at making the regulatory changes, and we're looking at getting positive feedback. And again, the boards and commissions who have been here, kudos to them. We have a lot of staff people from the town who have been here. You know, Luke Murray sat through most of the meetings as the deputy town manager. Mr. Manning participated. We've had council members drift in and out. But we're excited, and a big part of that is when I came here 3.5 years ago, I asked for funding to initiate some studies in town like that. So we say we don't move fast. It has taken 3 years for us to find sufficient funding to do this study. We also have support from the town council to do additional and expanded studies within the community, but those take time too. But we're trying to move some of those initiatives forward to deal with stormwater, traffic, transportation, water quality. And there was a question on sewer and water availability. Some of those questions need to be asked, but we don't know what question to ask until our consultant tells us, do we have 100,000 square feet of new GLA? Do we have 100 units? Or do we have 200,000 of new GLA? GLA is gross leasable area. So new gross leasable area, retail, office, and how many units do we have? When we know how much development the corridor may have from an aesthetic standpoint, we can ask the questions of how much infrastructure do we have to support that new development. And today, I don't know what upgrades we may need or whether the systems are in place to do that, but we will have those answers for it. We're in the first couple of months of this study. We have another 4 or 5 months of this study to continue. As Jason mentioned in the beginning, we're in phase 2. Phase 3 is a more in-depth dive into what you've seen today. I think it's amazing what this crew has done in 7 days, 5 working days. Okay, we didn't give them a recess. went to Mystic, they went to Newport, they went to Providence. And they didn't just walk around as tourists, they took pictures of everything they liked and didn't like so that they can expand their vernacular in order to bring that discussion to this venue tonight. So again, they did have the weekend off, kind of, but as planners and designers, wherever we go, we take pictures. If my son was here tonight, he would tell you he's in a lot of photos for scale and proportion to the building. So, again, kudos to everybody in the room. I'll just turn it back to Jason if he has any wrap-up comments. But again, give yourselves a hand up. Round of applause.
But if you want to respect some time, our designers will stand by the maps and by the renderings. We're available for your questions. We appreciate everything that everyone has taught us, and we look forward to the next conversation. Thank you all.
Thanks for wrapping that up, Tom. Thank you. Really good with it. Yeah, thank you. Appreciate you coming.
Jamie, over at PCS Navigation, we have a very nice